Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for January 14th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
Colin McNabb present.
Sulicio present, all two of us. I'd like to announce that the meeting is being tape recorded. Chairman's additions or deletions. We are adding 3.4. Should I read it, Andy?
You can if you'd like. Sure.
Vote to accept gifts from the following: a donation of a Lexmark printer from John Carafella and a donation of a Samsung printer from Melissa Herman. Nice. 3.5 as well, vote to proclaim January as Senior Appreciation Month. Seniors appreciate that. And 3.6, vote to increase the spending authorization from the Recreation Commission revolving account by $15,000 above the $52,000 authorized by town meeting. Okay, and we have an appointment at 7:05. Let's give it a couple. I can't do 3-1. Any suggestions, Andy?
We have to minutes.
Oh, yeah, minutes. Okay. Review and approve the meeting minutes. This is 1.4 from January 7th, 2014.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from January 7th, 2014.
Okay, Colin, I'll second that. I didn't see anything that I thought needed to be changed. You okay?
No, I'm fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If you wanted to do 3-4,
Okay.
actually 3-4 through 3-6, depending on how much time we have.
Okay, we're going to skip down to 3-4. Vote to accept gifts from the following. Colin?
I make a motion to accept the gifts from the following: a donation of a Lexmark X264DN printer from John Carafella to the MIS department, and a donation of a Samsung SCX 4100 printer from Melissa Herman to the Veterans Agent.
I'll second that. That's very nice.
Yes, very much appreciated.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With thanks. 3.5, vote to proclaim January as Senior Appreciation Month. Andy?
This is something that we typically do every year. We're a little, fell a little bit behind this year, so trying to get this in to show our appreciation of our senior population, which numbers somewhere in the area of 1,200 people.
Wow.
Would you like to do?
You want to read it?
Should we read this?
It's up to the board. Sometimes we read these proclamations, but not always.
I don't think you need to.
No.
I'll just make a motion.
I make a motion to proclaim January as Senior Appreciation Month.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's go back up to 2.1. Joint meeting with the planning board to appoint a member to fill a vacancy until the next annual election. Hi, planning board.
Howdy, Mayor.
Somebody needs to make a motion on that?
Well, you called to order the joint meeting, and
I would like to call to order the joint meeting of the planning board and board of selectmen.
then
Should we-
take any,
Yeah, let's, no. You have a quorum,
Planning board does indeed have a quorum.
and so do we. And we had the 1 month, within 1 month of a vacancy, the board or commission shall give written notice, which you did,
Yep.
to the selectmen. Selectmen shall post a notice of a joint meeting at least 1 week in advance of the meeting.
which we did.
which we did. The chairman of the Board of Selectmen calls the joint meeting to order, which we did, and we said what it was about. The chair calls for nominations. Could I get nominations to fill the vacancy?
Madam Chairman, I would like to nominate Perry J. Tomasetti of 5 Gemini Lane, Townsend, Mass., to be a voting member of the planning board until the next election.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations?
I wish.
Not at this
We're
time.
still 2 members short.
Okay, we're still 2 members short, folks. Hearing none, we could close the nominations. And the chair calls for a roll call vote for nominees by members of the Board of Selectmen and the members of the board or commission. So, roll call, please.
Colin McNabb, aye.
Sulicio, aye.
Chris Jones, aye.
Jeff Peduzzi, aye. Chris Nosella, aye.
Karen Coughlin, aye.
Where are you? Any opposed? Okay, it passes. We therefore declare
Mr. Tomasetti.
Mr. Tomasetti the candidate to fill the vacancy on the board. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll have a letter for you and for him and get sworn in
He's in that step.
Outstanding.
And that's until the next
for the
election,
next
Until the
election.
next election,
which
correct.
is April.
Joint board now closed.
The joint meeting is now closed.
Move to close. Second.
Second.
Closed.
All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have the same thing with the Housing Authority.
Okay. Do we have a quorum for the Housing Authority? It's not quite 7:15.
Oh, yeah, we actually have to wait.
Lori? I'm going to skip down until 7:15 anyway, okay? Let's go back down to 3.6, vote to increase the spending authorization from the Recreation Commission revolving account by $15,000 above the $52,000 authorized by town meeting. Mr. Sheehan, could you explain, please?
Sure. We have a number of revolving accounts. The Recreation revolving account is the largest. All of their fees and charges that they assess to people for admission to their programs fund their operation. So operates in many ways like the water department, where the water fees run the water department. They are, the difference between a revolving account and an enterprise account is that with a revolving account, there is a maximum spending limit that's established by town meeting. It has recently been $52,000. Historically has been around that amount. And they are trending above that. They're not above it yet, but they are getting close, and they are unlikely to finish the fiscal year under that $52,000 ceiling. So the statute does allow for the town to raise the spending authorization by vote of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. We did it last year. They were over. I don't remember what the amount was. And we're going to be looking at looking again at their operation to make sure that we're authorizing enough, and also that they're living within their means.
I have a question. The authorization at this point is for $52,000. That was for the year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So they're coming to us because they anticipate going over that, which apparently means they have more programs than they had anticipated, or it's going over that amount.
Right.
What do they have in their revolving fund?
Right now, they're down to about $3,100. 3,100, I'm sorry, that's not what you asked.
No.
I don't know that
Their balance on the 52 is 31 then? The
Correct.
remaining balance
Yeah,
from 52.
I don't have their, I don't have the total amount in there. I think Kim Fales told me it was around 45 or 50,000. It'll get replenished in the summertime when they do their summer rec program. That's when they bring in the lion's share of their receipts.
No issues.
Okay.
I make a motion to increase the spending authorization from the Recreation Commission revolving account by $15,000 above the $52,000 authorized by town meeting.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just one?
Yeah, just the chairman's signature.
Okay. It's not quite 7:15.
If you wanted to do 4-1,
Let's go down to 4-1 then. Appoint interim tax collector to serve until a permanent collector is named. Mr. Sheehan?
we, as we know, Kathy Rosbach has resigned as treasurer and collector. And a couple of months ago, we filled on an interim basis the treasurer position, the treasurer piece of her job. We didn't advertise and fill the collector piece right away. Kathy stayed on for a period of time and assisted us as we transitioned, as she transitioned out. She has expressed her desire to fully enter her retirement, which who can blame her for that? And so we advertised for an interim collector, and we received a second application, but it just came in yesterday. And I'm recommending to the board that you appoint Beth Ann Scheid as the interim tax collector. Beth Ann is the collector in Ashby, has a number of years of experience as a collector, has a good working relationship with Kate Stacy, who is our interim treasurer, knows the software that we're running here, and should be able to step right in and help to keep things moving along. And then over the next couple of months, we'll be looking at evaluating how the finance operations are structured. We've talked in the past about whether we should keep it as a combined position, one person holding both the treasurer and the collector piece, or if we should separate them. They're similar, or they're related, but they're not similar. And so I think over the next couple of months, I would suggest that we allow the two individuals to serve as the interims for maybe until March or April, see how things look, where we stand, make a final decision at that time whether we want to keep them separate or recombine them. And this also is related to the special legislative act that we submitted last year and is waiting. I think I misspoke last week. Wasn't clear that the legislation has been passed by the House and the Senate, but it has not yet been signed by the governor. It's on his desk. I did talk to the senator's office today. They expect that it'll probably be signed by the end of the week.
Okay. So we don't want to move forward until
We don't want to move
anything
forward on
permanent,
the
until
permanent.
that comes through.
That's correct. And we haven't posted for a permanent. We posted it specifically as an interim.
Okay, I have a question, just, and it doesn't have to do with this particular appointment. Well, one part of my question does. The two temporary positions, the two people being appointed temporary for this, there's no kind of obligation that the town has. This is, they both understand this is totally temporary, that the job's going to be looked at. They may or may not qualify for the end result. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to say about it was, I was going, actually, I was looking through our job descriptions. I saw the town treasurer listed, but did not see a description. They're in the employee matrix.
The treasurer
The
is.
treasurer is in the employee matrix. The tax collector is not, because that was an elected position.
Correct.
We're going to have to look at the matrix, and we're going to have to look at job description.
Right.
Or just descriptions.
Yeah, we would have
Okay,
to
and
slot that in.
qualifications, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay? I think this is a good opportunity to really look at what do we need in those positions.
Right.
To get the most out of them. And, you know, turnover is hard sometimes because we lose someone that we like a lot.
Exactly.
But it's also an opportunity to look at that position and make sure it's written the way that it needs to be going forward.
Right.
Okay? So, do you have any?
No, I talked to Andy about this once I read the packet, so
Okay.
I've no problem with this, and
Okay.
she sounds more than qualified. I do have one question in the motion, Andy. Should we put the hours per week or the rate? Or-
We should include the rate and that it's up to 19 hours per week.
Okay.
And that it is interim until a permanent appointment is made.
Madam Chair, are you ready for a motion?
Please.
I make a motion to appoint Beth Ann Scheid as interim tax collector to serve until a permanent collector is named at a hourly rate of $25.73 and number of hours per week up to 19 hours.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, sorry, we're past the 7:15. Is this my little sheet?
Yes.
Okay, 2.2, joint meeting with Housing Authority to appoint a member to fill a vacancy until the next annual election. We had been notified, the Board of Selectmen was notified of the vacancy within a month. We posted a joint meeting notice 1 week in advance. I will, and do you have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I will call the joint meeting of the Selectmen and the board to get, to order.
Thank you.
Do we have nominations to fill the vacancy?
Yes, we do. We do have more than one vacancy, but we only have one nomination this evening, and that is Heather Arujo of 20 Canal Street in West Townsend.
So you're nominating her?
Yes, and I would so move.
It's been moved. Do I have a second?
So, yes, I'll second.
Any other nominations?
We wish.
I know. Gee, the last board
I
said the
know.
same thing.
I know.
I know, I wish to.
Yeah.
I wish to. Okay, could I get a roll call vote, please?
Colin McNabb, aye.
Sulicio, aye.
Laura Schifrin, aye.
Kevin Smith, aye.
That's it.
It's unanimous.
Unanimous.
And Heather is here with us this evening.
Where is she? Hi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Laura, you have one more opening, local post, and then the governor's appointment, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've been posted for a year. They've been posted for a year.
They've been posted for a year.
They've been posted for a year.
Yeah. Okay, well, I declare then
Well,
Heather Arujo as our interim member, and thank you very much.
Until the election.
Until
She
the
goes
election,
Until the election.
right. Okay.
While we're in a joint meeting,
Yes.
if you wouldn't mind, we discussed at our meeting, Townsend Housing Authority, the advantages that hopefully the town is supposed to be deriving from the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. We pay into that on a yearly basis. We have a representative from Townsend from the planning board, which is per, I guess, our bylaws or whatever they allow, and an alternate for that position from the Townsend Housing Authority. We were notified this past year that our representative is actually the secretary, and so he holds a position on that board. Yet, we don't seem to be getting any grants, if you will. I was going to say advantages or benefits of, being on that and having a representative on it, and we really should be. So we as a board wanted to bring that to your attention as selectmen, that perhaps we should be looking at this a little bit closer. I do get notices once a month. Actually, I didn't get December or January, because I did check, and November 1st was the last that I got, regarding some kind of request for if we had wanted something, we had to send something to them, and that was on November 1st, and I don't know if anybody, if we have sent anything to them from the town.
Okay. Andy, maybe that's something that we could, jointly meet on again, and maybe with planning as well. Could you just look into it and see what would need to do?
Yeah, I think in terms of the way that the MRPC bylaws are written, the planning board designates the Townsend, the
Correct,
town rep.
and you affirm, and
Yeah.
that was affirmed, and I believe it's done on a yearly basis.
I think that's correct, yeah. And then the selectmen appoint the alternate?
I don't remember.
Do you remember?
Well, you did. I mean,
Yeah.
the recommendation comes from the Housing Authority,
Yeah.
and you did, in fact, it was me. So,
Right, so the
but
planning board appoints
that aside.
the full rep.
Right.
And then the board appoints the alternate.
So actually, the report should be coming, it was a few years ago that we talked about this, actually, and the report should actually be coming from the representative of the planning board back to the planning board, the THA, and the selectmen, so that there's some kind of communication as to what is
Okay.
going on.
So we
And-
need to understand in common what the process for communication is. Okay. So maybe you could help us look into
Sure.
what should that process be, and are we following it, and if we're not, where might those improvements?
Yeah, so that we can benefit
Right,
from what we
exactly.
participate in.
Yeah.
Because there's money out there,
Right.
and we might as well.
And the other
get
communities
what
are
we
getting it,
can.
and
Okay.
we're not.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
very much.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
And did we close the meeting?
I don't think you did, you
No.
probably should.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. And we're past, but 2.3.
Just talk fast.
Rename bridges on Wheeler Road and Turnpike Road.
These came to us as, I know that Wheeler came as a petition, and I forget how Turnpike, it was a while ago that we first talked about this.
Probably
Again, if
because
that-
everyone knows it as Rossback Bridge.
Yeah, yeah.
It's what we call it anyway,
Kind of.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's kind of, pointing out the obvious, but we consulted with the state. The state has historically claimed ownership of bridges and bridge namings, but that has apparently changed, and there's a letter in the board's packet from Senator Flanagan's office saying that these bridges, because they're local jurisdiction bridges, we can name them without any state oversight. So, the Amadons have requested that the Wheeler Road Bridge be renamed the Amadon Family Memorial Bridge, and the Rossbacks have requested that the Turnpike Road Bridge be named what everybody calls it anyways, the Rossback Bridge, or if you prefer, the Rossback Memorial Bridge, or we haven't printed up the signs yet, so we can name it anything it would like to be, the family would like it to be named, but I know that there are representatives from both families here tonight.
Let's take them one at a time.
Before I do that, I just want to say I cannot think of any two more deserving families in town that deserve this honor.
Nice.
I make a motion to rename the Wheeler Road Bridge as the Amadon Family Memorial Bridge.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion to rename the Turnpike Road Bridge as the Rossback Bridge.
And I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's really nice. I'm glad. I'm really glad.
And we'll get signs made up. The highway department will get signs made up. We'll get those up as soon as we can.
Excellent.
Nice. Ooh.
Thank you.
Happens when it breaks, you have to fix it.
That's what goes off the side of it, we have to jump in and down back up. Done that before too.
Yeah, no.
So we've got to tell everybody, all the fire people need to know, that's now
We
their
already
new
knew that,
names.
is that-
I know, that's what you call it anyway, right? I know.
Nothing
with me,
changes,
with
right, Bill?
The Amador Bridge, that's what I'd call it all the time, because it's right there.
We'll put it on the map.
Yes, it'll put it on the map,
There's a lot
yes.
of good people live on Wheeler Road,
Congratulations
but
to
that
all
bridge
of
always
you.
led to Amazon.
Exactly.
Congratulations to you and your families.
Congratulations to
Thank
the
you.
families.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We've got to, do we need to wait on the 7:30? Yes, we do.
It's not a
It's not a
hearing,
hearing? Okay.
so you can,
Well, then
take
let's-
that before.
Let's go to 2.4. Fire Station Building Committee is meeting, we're meeting with the committee to discuss next steps in developing a new headquarters station.
So we met a week ago, I guess it was, and talked about the next steps for the project, and we talked about a couple of alternatives, being one, a request for proposals to find space to lease, or going back to, or sticking with the sort of plan of record, which is what we refer to as a design bid build project, where we would ask for funds for design and construction and land acquisition, and we would oversee the design, oversee the bidding, and then build it under our oversight. And the board wanted a little time to chew that over. I don't know if the committee has anything new since last week, but that's kind of where we left it last week.
Chief, you were going to talk to Capital?
We're talking to
Or is it this week?
next Thursday.
Next week? Okay. So nothing new's happened there.
No.
Colin, I know that you wanted to kind of think about this a little bit more.
Yeah, I did. I've thought about it. I think that moving forward with requests for bid or just no propose. What is it? The RFPs.
RFP for lease?
Yeah, for a lease. I have no problem with that.
Oh dear. I do.
Uh-oh.
So this gets back to what
This
you were
is-
asking
this
before about what happens when you disagree.
Yes. You better be careful what you ask for, though. This was the RFP where we'd say, hey, does anybody want to build a fire station and rent it to us?
Correct.
I have a real problem with that. I just think it's a way to get around the laws in terms of how municipal buildings get built. I just have a real problem with it, and I think that at some point that would catch up to us.
Sue?
Yes.
Andy, is there any precedent for this?
Yeah, at the state level there is.
Sure. There is. It's unusual for a building like a fire station. It is more common when you're talking just office space.
But it's not unheard of.
No, certainly not. The city of Fitchburg is leasing space right now. They're leasing from the Commonwealth, so they didn't have to go through a procurement process. But there are a number of other cities and towns that are leasing space. It comes up most often in towns for a temporary relocation for a town hall. For instance, if you were going to do a renovation of your town hall, you had to move out. And in cities, it comes up fairly frequently with police substations, where police want to, a city like Boston might have 20 or 30 substations around the city. So they solicit for space in Roxbury and Hyde Park and in East Boston, and so they would use that RFP process, or they could use that RFP process.
I think the precedent that I was thinking about was more, how much does the state or the state inspector or attorney general or whoever, my understanding is that they look pretty closely at projects like that to make sure that you are not subverting the law.
Correct, and we would, as I mentioned last week, we would still be subject to the prevailing wage law. So it's not a way to get out from under that. Council was very clear on.
And what about competitive bidding?
Yeah, the RFP process is a competitive process. It's not limited to people who own land or own a building in the area that we designate. It could be done speculatively. Some builder could say, yeah, I can bid on this, and I'll bid, and I'll get an option to buy a piece of land within the geographic area that's been identified. So it is not exclusionary in any way. That's not to say you might not, you could go through the process and get one bid, one proposal. You could go through the process and get no proposals.
But we don't have to accept.
Correct.
But it wouldn't
You
be
can always
us.
cancel.
So what's the problem with?
Okay, the question is, who runs the project? Who runs the project? The person that wins the RFP? Okay?
Right, we would be
Okay.
issuing a request for proposals for somebody to provide us with a fire station. If they have a building that can be retrofitted, they could propose to retrofit that. If they have a piece of raw land, they could propose to build it. We would give them the feasibility study, and we would say, this is what we're looking for, this is the geographic area we want it by this date, you build it for us, or you retrofit, and you deliver it to us by that time, and what are the terms, what are the lease terms per year, how many years, and then they would build it without our, really without our oversight. They have to deliver what we specify for them. And then we have to figure out
And
how.
what recourse do we have that they do that? I mean, the thing I like about us being in charge of the building project is there's a lot of checks and balances in that. You know, you have an OPM, you have your building committee, you're watching everything that's being done. If this is a private concern, okay, great, you gave them design, what says they're gonna stick to that? Who says they're gonna stick
We'd
to it?
have the right to
We would have,
inspect.
yeah, we would have the right, and we would have the obligation.
Okay,
And so
right
if
to
they-
inspect doesn't tell me that that's, let's say there needed to be some kind of a reduction. You get to a certain point and you know what, we don't have enough money to build it quite the way that it was gonna be built. With our present building committee, they would make those decisions. What stays, what goes, what changes, what doesn't. Who's gonna make those decisions?
Those decisions would not come into play, because we would be saying, this is what we're looking for. It's however many bays, however many square feet of office space and training space and whatever other space it is. You deliver that to us, and you tell us what that's gonna cost.
And who protects us in terms of making sure that that's the way that it's done?
Well, we wouldn't assume tenancy, and we wouldn't start paying if it didn't meet the specs. Obviously, it's easy
I'm
if,
just really concerned about it because it's a process that we've never undertaken before. It, to me, borders on something that is trying to get around the way that municipalities usually fund things and make things happen, especially if it's a rent with an option to buy down the road. Because in essence, then, well, you're really building it for us, okay? I just.
and they are. And
They
they are,
are.
which is okay, because they would still have to abide by the prevailing wage law.
Brett has a question.
We always have the fallback of going the traditional route. And there's certainly, it's less common to do the request for proposals. And the funding source would be the operating budget rather
Okay,
than.
exactly, and so
than
what
a
is
debt
what would be the rental charge?
Well, that would have to be worked
Would
out.
be in the proposal. and then-
proposal.
In the
and then
proposal.
And then at town meeting, we would go
But we
and
don't
ask
have
for
to
an
accept the
appropriation.
proposal. We can put it out there and request proposals, but we don't have to accept
Big
any.
difference between increasing your operating budget for renting a property and doing a debt exclusion where after 20 years it's paid for. There's a big difference. That kind of an increase in your operating budget could put us into a situation where we'd have to override 2.5 in order to afford it.
And we would. So it becomes a choice between doing a debt
A
exclusion.
2.5 override is what I just heard.
But we
Colin.
haven't gotten
Right.
there yet.
Well-
We're not even at that point yet. We're just,
The reality is that more than likely you'd need an override to fund a lease payment, or you'd need a debt exclusion to fund the debt, the debt payments. It would
So are you telling me,
presumably come
Mr.
out
McNabb,
about the same.
that you would be willing to say, okay, if the rent is this amount, I'll back Townsend doing a 2.5 override in order to pay for this for the next 20, 30 years?
I don't know what I would say when we get to that point. However, I don't see any harm in getting proposals.
Chief, where are you at with this?
I think as a committee, we try to look outside the box to get this project off the ground. I think the concern that I have is the fact that you're not looking at a debt exclusion, you're looking at a general override. Rough estimates, I think you're looking at probably in the vicinity of $400,000 or better a year in costs that needs to be included in your operating expenses, which means that's a general override. And my fear is that we go through this whole process, we get to the general override and it fails. The likelihood of, and I've said it before, is this town has not done a general override for anything other than a school or trash in the history of general overrides. So we don't, it doesn't look good in that progress, and all it does is if it fails, it sets us back a good year beyond where we are today. And we're struggling now with the buildings we've got. And if we don't do something soon, you're gonna have to start making major investments into these old buildings just to keep them operational for now. I don't know what else to tell you.
If that number is anywhere near correct, I will not support a general override for something like that. I think it's the wrong way to fund a project like that. I think the way to fund a project for a building is to do a debt exclusion. I think the town also deserves to say whether or not they want a building. You know, whether they're willing to support it. The ramifications of a 2.5 override for that amount of money on the town, I can't support it.
We're not even at that point.
But you know it's gonna be more than $10,000.
Yeah, obviously. We need more than $10,000.
Do you wanna make a motion?
Wait, I wanna.
I
have a
mean,
couple-
I mean,
What is the alternative
the alternative is to bring the project to town meeting.
at the annual town meeting?
Annual town meeting.
Or the,
But
yeah.
we
Through the
need,
capital.
capital planning to put it on the capital plan in
But
order to bring it to
no.
town
Not
meeting.
the
It's
town-
different, not for the annual. The annual,
Okay,
we can
Good.
put that on.
then that's the alternative, okay? If that should fail, we're certainly gonna learn something from it. We're gonna learn where is our community in all of this. They're gonna have a chance to ask questions. You're gonna know from the questions that they're asking what their concerns are. Their concerns are not gonna be just money. They never are, okay? So if they haven't spoken up yet and gotten to the building committee or anyone else, this is a chance for them to speak up. This is a chance for them to say, where does this fit in our priorities? And if they turn it down, maybe it's just a matter of they'll say to the building committee, you know what, go back and see what you can do within these parameters.
Say it does fail at the annual town meeting, then we could look at this option then.
So go forward with a traditional,
Is that
One of the things that,
You're not gonna get me to agree with it, Colin. I will not agree with it. That's,
One of the things that we're gonna try to do again is we're gonna try to hold another informational night closer to the town meeting. So sometime in April, we'll hold another general, and we can put these options out on the floor at the same time and get a feel for what the people think and what the people want.
the
They're going to know
RFP
what-
option, you mean?
The RFP option, we can talk, when you do a general meeting like that, where you, for an informational, you can talk about anything you want about the building. What are the options? Get the feel from the people of the community, what they would like to see. I personally, my personal feeling, and I'm not speaking for the committee, my personal feeling is, like you said, I don't think a general override's gonna fly. I think they're having a hard time with the debt exclusion, that a general override is not gonna go anywhere. And all it's gonna do is push us farther and farther back. By that time, in April, they're gonna know what the school, we're looking at for the school, because you have the special town meeting coming up in March for that. has been my fear all along is that this project's competing against the school, and I didn't want that to happen, but the inevitability is here, and that's what's happening now. I can't say what the public's gonna say, the public's gonna do. I know they don't like seeing their taxes increase for anything, but the reality is we've got to start making an investment, and if we don't pretty soon, it's gonna cost them a lot more money than what the new building's gonna cost. So.
Sue?
Speaking on behalf of the committee, nor do we want to see an override vote. We would rather pay for this debt exclusion. It seems to be the easiest way to do that, and probably the most proper way. But you gotta understand, we're trying to bring every option to you people to discuss and vote on and tell us what direction to go to. We want this to go in front of the people. That's what we wanted in November or December. It didn't happen. We want that to come in front of the people. If they say no, well then guess what? We gotta click heads again, and we gotta come up with something. But one thing is for sure, we need something different than what we have now.
My feeling is to put it on the annual town meeting and,
I agree, as it was prevented from going to town meeting in its entirety at the special town meeting. My position has always been that this needs to be debated by
Town floor.
on the town meeting floor.
that's right.
So is that something the committee would support?
Absolutely, 100%. And we would like to have an informational night. I think Don's right, but I would like it to be highly publicized. If people have questions, I would really like them to get in that room. We had very few people show up that night, and then we had everybody downing it and asking different questions out of this building. If you have questions, come in. We're not gonna holler and scream at anybody.
Bring a buffet.
We'll try to answer the questions, bring a cup of coffee with you, sit in a room and let's bang heads together and get this done. Somebody may have a legitimate idea that they could bring to us. We're open to that.
I mean, certainly, all the information that you can get out there is a good thing. Let's bring it to town meeting and see what the town wants to do going forward. Agreed?
Agreed.
We don't have to arm wrestle?
Oh, that was a close one.
Just do it anyways for fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to vote on the preference, the board's preference, or do you want to just leave it as?
No, I don't think we need a vote. It's just, we'll put
We're
it
gonna
on,
put it on the,
we're gonna
it'll
put
be
it
on
the warrant.
It will definitely be on there.
We will put it
You
there.
have, I can't speak, I think I feel comfortable speaking for Sue when I say you have our word on it, that it'll be on that, on the
Well, I mean,
warrant for the annual town meeting.
we got a lot of witnesses too.
I know, lots of them.
Okay. So when the time comes to start putting that warrant together, that should be one of the articles. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
3.1, I think we're in.
Yep. Okay, 3.1, discuss the process of responding to requests by those seeking assistance from the various poor and worthy funds. Mr. Sheehan.
So we talked about this at the meeting last week, and the board directed me to come up with a recommendation for how we would, at the staff level, address these requests for assistance from the poor and worthy funds. I talked about it with some of our staff. Also spoke today with Renee Fossey from the Abrams French Fund Committee, and what put in front of the board tonight is a three-person
Where is it?
working group.
Is it
Should be
in?
in what I mailed you the other day.
The initial one.
Just so I can look at it. Okay, what's the gist?
There it is.
Oh, that is it.
So it would be, what I'm suggesting is one member of the Board of Selectmen, one member of the Abram S. French Fund Committee, designated by the committee, and either myself or, well, the town administrator or designee would meet. It's a it's not a committee-level meeting, it's a staff-level meeting, so it's not something that's governed by the open meeting law. It's more like a department, staff, staff-level meeting. So we would be able to move quickly on requests and fund those that we deem worthy.
So it doesn't, for instance, it doesn't have to be a specific selectman, just one of us.
Correct. It could be whichever one is available on a
Because
given,
that would probably make it
given week.
easier.
You could say, Colin, it's going to be you for the year, or you could, it would be up to the board to, however you wanted to do it.
Right. Just was thinking, so it would be, it could be more flexible if
Correct.
it was any of
And
us.
1 week it could be Renee, 1 week it could be Mr. Sweet.
Right.
Could vary week to week.
Okay, so then approved funding requests will be placed on the warrant. So assuming that these three people agree, then it goes on the warrant, and therefore the payment would go out potentially within 7 days
Correct.
of the request, right?
Yeah, we should be able to move very quickly on these and help people in the manner that was intended when these funds were set up, which is to get them assistance in a hurry, in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I don't think that it was intended that it be a lot of red tape in order to
Right.
help somebody.
Mr. Sweet, what's your opinion of this setup?
Well, that's what I was hoping to derive out of the meeting tonight was obviously the process, and I did talk to Renee today.
Okay, good.
She met with you today. And one of the things, I guess I would kind of like a scenario of how this would all take place. Let me give you an example. A person either sends in or calls up someone indicating that they need assistance. What would be the procedure to go from here? What would they need to do? How would our committee be involved, for example, prior to meeting with this three-person working group?
I think the way that I envision it is the French Fund Committee has been so involved in these things over the years in providing assistance. I don't see that ending, and certainly wouldn't want to see that end. I would expect that a lot of these requests, or maybe most of these requests, would still start with the committee. And whoever it is on the committee, it's typically Renee that I interact with, would call and say, we got a request, somebody needs $800 for heating oil. They need it by January 20th. What can we get everybody together? So Renee or you would be available. Myself or maybe Karen or somebody else would be available.
And one of
Call
us.
one selectman, say, can you come in Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock? We all get together. We look at the situation, the person requesting the assistance. All looks good. Looks like it fits that they are, quote, worthy. Identify which fund we should pay it out of, the number of funds that are available. If we're all in agreement, we put it on a bills payable warrant for the following Tuesday. And if the timeline is even shorter than that, somebody needs it by Friday. And if we can act quickly enough, we can cut a manual check. The treasurer can cut a check, and we can get it moving. It's so I think it can be that. I think it can be that nimble.
So if a person requests assistance, what we've done in the past is we've investigated to make sure, number one, that person is a citizen of the community, and that the need, in fact, is justified.
You would still do the same thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'd still follow the same process.
You
that
would
we've
do
done
the
in
same
past.
thing. Basically, what you're doing is coming to a smaller group quicker and saying, we have this person, we've checked it out, this is the fund we recommend that it comes from. Is everybody here in agreement, or does anyone have any questions? And if everyone agrees, then the check can get cut pretty quickly. You're
that's-
still the ones making the decisions and
Okay.
looking and reviewing that.
Yeah, it's still starting
I
with you.
don't see us as being involved in that.
Okay. The other factor would be is we've obviously only dealt with the French fund itself, or that aspect of the funding groups. Obviously, you know the other funding groups better, and so you're saying that it's going to become sort of like a pool of money from those funding groups?
Yeah, I guess in a way it would be. The Atwood Fund has the largest amount of available resources in it. So that's been the one that for the last several years at least, we've been drawing from. As if that starts to get drawn down, we could start to look at some of the other funds. The Wilson Fund is very small. I think there's a fair amount in the Amanda Dwight Fund. I have the balances here, I forget what they are offhand. But the Atwood is significantly larger than the others. We would probably continue to draw from that. And that could be a recommendation that we would make based on the size of the request and what the funds are available in each of the funds. We could say, this makes sense to draw from the Atwood, or this one makes sense to draw from the Wilson.
Because in the past, we haven't had any involvement as a French fund itself or a
Right.
committee as to which fund it comes from. And so therefore, money was always thought to be part of what the French fund had available
Right.
to offer
Yeah.
for assistance.
Yeah.
How has that been working?
Right now, the French fund, from what I understand financially, the account is down pretty significantly.
It is, but it's not.
But how does it work for the other ones? The ones that Mr. Sweet is not usually part
So
of?
the way that it has worked over the last few years is that requests would go to the French Fund Committee.
All requests?
All requests. And if they were under $500, the committee would write a check from the French Fund checking account. If it was more than that, they would come to us through our office to the Board of Selectmen, and we would put it on the agenda and say, request for assistance out of the Worthy Fund. And the board would vote it out of the Worthy Fund, would have put it on the warrant, process it, and it would get paid. So
who makes the
parts of it-
decision? The treasurer, the accountant? Who
It's been the town
decides?
administrative staff
Okay.
that has made that historically.
Okay.
So in that respect, it doesn't really change
No,
much.
because
It's
the
really just
requests
the
are still
mechanics.
coming to you.
Right.
It's just it's more of an accounting kind of thing to decide?
Well, in the past, it's been, as Mr. Sheehan mentioned, that, we would, the amount of money, $500 or under, would be our responsibility, and we had the town treasurer, obviously, be the person that signs the check, so there wouldn't be any question as to us signing off on
Right.
things without having it meet official approval through the treasurer's office. This way, it sounds to me as if that bottom limit, that $500 limit, is really going to be waived from here on in. As far as the French fund is concerned, because I don't believe we would have the money.
Well, some money got transferred, some CDs got closed out, and so that got transferred into the checking account. So the number I have is that you have about $6,700.
And that's for available money for the
Yeah,
checking account?
that's in the checking account.
Okay.
And then the others is another better than $90,000 in other funds.
So we don't anticipate that under 500 thing changing?
No, I think that can
That
continue
can
on.
continue.
That can continue.
I think that can
okay.
continue.
Because that was when I spoke with Renee today, that was a question she had. She thought that all of it was going to have to be approved through.
Yeah,
the-
and I,
That's
three-person
fine.
when
working.
Renee came in, I couldn't find the file that had the balances, so I wasn't able to tell her that. I found that about 10 minutes, obviously 10 minutes after she left. Figures 10 minutes after she left.
So in other words, when we're dealing with quote-unquote smaller amounts of money, 500 or under, we'll still have the same process where French Fund will work on them and we won't have to call together
Correct.
a group
Right.
of the three-person working committee.
Yep.
Anything over that will necessitate us investigating as we always will, and
Yeah.
then bringing it to the three-person
So
committee.
in many respects, the process for the committee doesn't really change. The 500 threshold is still the same.
Okay.
Above 500, you're still coming to the board, but it's in a much more expedited fashion.
Okay.
You know, if you got a, for instance, if you got a request tomorrow for somebody who really needed assistance, needed $800 or $900 for something, the board's not scheduled to meet again until February 11th. So though, that person would really be out of luck for, or, you know, maybe not out of luck completely, but certainly delayed. What we're proposing is that we could address that within a week. And the board schedule wouldn't have to come into play with it. And the open meeting law for the committee, you wouldn't have to worry about meeting the 48-hour posting requirement and all of that. You could, because it's only one member, you can move quickly without the
So we
need.
would not have to have a meeting to approve
Correct.
anything 500 or under?
Oh, 500 and under you would, yeah.
So we
But-
still would follow the same
Yeah.
meeting
Yes.
laws?
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, but for the larger requests, you wouldn't have to
Okay.
worry about that.
And the other question, we will still have to have that check that we would write, approve, signed off by the treasurer.
That's correct, yeah.
As before. Okay, good.
Make sense?
I think it's worth a
Thank you.
try.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it's
help
one of those things we
people.
can always tweak it.
Well, I mean, it's good in some respects in that we'll have the ability to be able to utilize other accounts for needy situations.
Right.
Because where we would have to come previously to the selectmen and then wait for meetings to come about to approve that money to be
Yeah,
transferred.
I think the intention is to try to be able to expedite these
Yes.
requests,
Good.
okay? If you find that something needs to be tweaked, then let Mr. Sheehan know, and we'll tweak it, okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna, I told Renee that I would call her back after, as a result of tonight's meeting, and that may generate some questions on her part, in which case we may
Sure.
get
Yeah.
together with you to go over any little loopholes that might be.
And just so we can sort of tie up loose ends on for the benefit of future boards and committee members and town staff, what I would suggest is that we put this into the form of a policy to be signed by the board. So in the motion, if the board is agreeable, the motion could be to sign the policy once it's drafted.
So, at this point, though, we're agreeing to the proposal and asking for it to be put in as a policy that we can also sign.
Correct.
Okay. That way it doesn't get delayed. You can implement it
That's
as
right.
soon as possible.
Yep. And you
Okay.
can even make the motion to sign the policy out of session, assuming that the policy states, that you.
Well, I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, the vote tonight doesn't have to be pending the policy.
Yeah, yep.
Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
So
Okay,
let's go with the new process. Is the new process as outlined in your memo? And as we discussed, I'm ready.
I move that we approve the process for addressing requests for assistance as presented by the town administrator.
I'll second that. And
and put in the form of policy.
and to.
And to be put in the form of policy.
Okay, good. Second.
So moved.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You might want to, maybe Mr. Sweet could work with you on how to word the policy in terms
Sure.
of a process that
Sure.
we want to document.
Definitely,
And, I mean, at this point, this is going forward, but just to have it included as a regular policy,
Good.
that would be great if you could help with that
Okay.
too.
Glad to.
Thank you. 3.2, discuss the capital planning committee's request that the Board of Selectmen advise if road improvements are a capital or operating expense.
It's an operating expense. All right, I'm not going to talk anymore. Just kidding.
Somebody help me. What are we being asked? I'm not really clear on what we're being asked.
Do you want to take it or you want me to take it?
So every year, for at least the last 4 years that I've been on the capital planning committee, the highway superintendent has requested $150,000 for roads improvement.
Has he gotten it?
Never gotten a cent, because I believe, and I can't speak for the capital planning committee, but for myself, I've always viewed it as an operating expense. It's not a capital item. You know, it's not, it's maintenance, it's ongoing road repair. You know, with the cuts that have been happening to Chapter 90 money, he always is trying to get as much, obviously, as possible to improve the roads in town. So the discussion came up at the last capital planning meeting as to whether that should even be on the, be put before the capital planning committee.
And do we have a recommendation or an opinion that we've heard from the finance committee on this?
No, we have not discussed it.
No. Mr. Sheehan, do you have any
2 cents?
I have
2
a
cents
nickel.
to put in?
I have a whole nickel. It was an extraordinary meeting, and I'm still scratching my head over it. The members that now seem to want to move road repairs into the operating budget have never, in the time that I've worked here and been working with the capital committee, have never viewed road repairs as an operating expense. They've always said, nope, it's over $10,000, it's going to last more than 5 years, it's a capital expense.
Which is why I thought Mr. Kukler always went to them with it,
Yeah.
because it was over 10,000 and he had to.
Yeah. For the same reason, they always say, they've always objected to funding police cruisers in the operating budget, which we've done at the request of the chief. Cruisers appear on the capital plan, but they're listed as an alternate funding source out of the operating budget. But that's been a bone of contention among some of the more vocal capital planning committee members. Notwithstanding that, I do think that cruisers, because of the short life that we typically have them, and road repairs are more of an operational cost than a capital cost. Because we don't, in the budget, we wouldn't say, we're going to give you $150 and you can only use it for paving. We're going to say that it's for road maintenance, or it's for public works maintenance. The intent being, most of it's going to go to paving, but it could go to crack sealing, or it could go to catch basin repairs or drainage improvements and things like that. I think it may open up the relevancy of looking at the bylaw again and sort of redefining
Tighten it up a little bit.
Well, yeah, redefining what we view a capital project to be. It's, it's right now it's a it's like a Roomba. It's it's always moving and bouncing around and changing on a weekly basis.
Tell me if this makes sense. I mean,
No, I'm just kidding.
when I think of capital, I think of it in the same sense that if you had a business and you used X numbers of reams of paper in that business over the course of time. That's operating, that's an expensed item, because and where the word expense comes from is how you handle it in accounting practice. It's an expense item. You use and pay for it during that time period, and it's completely expensed in that time period, okay? Versus you buy a piece of equipment, a printer, and that printer might cost you $5,000, and you pay for it this year, but in terms of how you expense that over time. It's capital equipment. It's something that you don't use the life of it. You don't use it all up in that same time period that you're paying for it.
Right.
So I tend to think of capital in that sense. Is it something that's going to last over a period of time and maybe depreciate, over time, versus something that is consumable, is more like a consumable. Now, in terms of road repair, I think that breaks out into different kinds of road repair. If it's for ongoing maintenance kinds of things, you fill the pothole today, it rains, guess what? You gotta fill the pothole again tomorrow, or when it stops raining. It's not something that lasts a very long time, but if you needed to invest in actually doing a stretch of road, you expect that to last longer than
Right.
the patching would. So maybe it's a case of Ed breaking out what he's going to spend the money on. This for patch, this kind of thing for longer term. Okay, because the concern that I have in putting all of the road repair costs into operating budget is that's going to cause a blip in operating budget. It's also going to it's going to be a concern within the limits of 2.5 as to how is that going to get funded. Not that the capital planning has funded it. So,
Right.
I mean, the reality is it's not being done. Maybe it needs to come out as, this is a longer term kind of thing. If it's something that's going to last 5 years, you're going to treat it as something that's going to last 5 years versus ongoing maintenance cost.
Yeah, and there are plenty of things in capital planning or in financial planning that can go either way. Cruisers, I mentioned before. Hardware is another area where people say, well, is it a capital item? If we're lucky, the computer will last 5 or 6 years. But it's kind of not really a capital item. It's more of an operating item. Roads are another thing.
And that, I
for
think,
some
was
of
the intention when the law was passed. It said $10,000, assuming that something over $10,000 is going to last a little while, right?
One would hope.
One would.
Yeah, and the 10,000 is,
It's kind of arbitrary.
That's arbitrary.
Right.
Some towns use 5, some towns use 50. It depends on the local flavor. I don't, in a way, I don't have an objection to moving road paving or road repair into the operating budget. But like you say, it's going to be hard to fund that on an ongoing basis. And so, the most vocal committee members have objected to, have not provided any input on
road repair.
on where funding would come from to, where you're going to cut. We have a finite amount of money. Where are you going to cut in order to fund road repair? And they've also objected to new revenue sources. So, it's, we're left, wrestling with not only one arm behind our back, but both arms behind our backs. And so, you know, it may be that instead of putting 200,000 into capital stabilization every year for capital improvements, we put something smaller in there and we use a piece of that to fund, we use a piece of that to fund road repairs.
I mean, I think at some point, we need to grapple with that one, you know?
I mean, the reason Ed keeps putting it on is because he would, I'm sure, love it to be in his operating budget.
Sure.
But that's a big chunk of change. And I think that that's not a bad idea, is that, you know, maybe we will, every year, set aside a percentage of the money would normally would go to capital.
Yeah.
To road repair.
The other thing that I think is happening.
Then it becomes a capital road repair.
No, but it's not, no, but it,
No, I
but we
know.
wouldn't even be
but
giving it.
But it's to say, this is how we're funding it. We understand that it's a capital expense, and we're funding it as a road capital expense. No matter which way you slice it, I think our town needs to deal with that as an
Right.
issue, okay?
In terms of the,
To me, it needs to be separate from the operating budget. It needs to be either its own stabilization fund or, you know, its own fund.
well, and it can be done through an article on town meeting, rather than within the budget. We do this often where we have sort of standalone purchases, like when we did the what's a good example? The compensation plan. That was an article, appropriate $12,000. When that's exhausted, it goes away, or when the project's done, the money goes back. You could do that on an annual basis or on a semi-annual basis for road work, and have a separate article outside the operating budget, outside the capital budget, that says appropriate X amount for road repairs. And then that carries forward over a year, because you don't have to spend it in a year.
I've never thought it was a capital item. I never thought it should have gone through the capital process. But I do like what Andy had said about kind of, and I'm not, and earmarking is not the right term for it, but
No, standalone article.
separating something.
And that was my point. you
And then
know,
that way we start the ball rolling.
The difference between filling potholes, doing regular maintenance, okay, that belongs to me in the operating budget.
Right.
Okay, that's supplies that you need, whatever that stuff is that you fill the potholes with. You need to buy it and do it. Okay, that's operating. But I think what we need to do is start saying, we're going to put this in as an article. The Finance Committee will be able to look at that in relationship to everything else. And that's where the request goes, as an article that is by itself, that folks know exactly what they're voting on.
Right.
This money's going to go to road improvement or road repaving.
And then, you know, say we appropriate, you know, $150,000, which is what Ed typically asks for. Well, some year he may only use 100,000 of it. Well, that other 50 can carry over to the next year. And so he can combine that with his Chapter 90 or with the next year's appropriation or whatever it happens to be. And it's not like a typical operating budget expense where if you don't use it, it goes away at the end of the year. So.
Okay, so let's get back to what the capital's asking. Should this be separate from the capital plan?
I think it should be.
I'm leaning toward it should be separate. If it's for ongoing maintenance, it should be in operating. If it's for actual more than 5-year road improvement kinds of things, you know, true paving projects, it should go on as a warrant article.
I'm more
Because
than
it's-
leaning in that direction.
Because it's not accomplishing anything for him to go to the capital planning every year and say, I need money, and every year they don't have the money to give him, okay? Or don't think it's their place to give it to him.
And that's just my
So,
opinion on it.
so how do we deal
Can't
with
speak
the
for the rest
fact
of the
that the
committee.
bylaw says an expense over $10,000 needs to go to capital planning?
Andy's doing something.
Well, nothing says that you can't appropriate, nothing says you have to do all capital items within the single capital warrant article. So, and nothing says you have to fund all capital appropriations out of the same pot of money. So the board can instruct the capital planning committee to not look at road improvements, not look at road repair, or whatever
Or-
phrase you want to use.
Or you know what? How about if we just ask Mr. Kukula not to submit those requests to capital planning and to instead submit them to us as an article?
Well, we can certainly do that. I think at this point, we need to tell the capital planning committee, if it's the board's opinion, don't include road repairs in the capital plan.
That's my,
That's fine,
okay.
that's fine.
And then
Do you need a motion?
I think so that it is clear, we should.
I make a motion that we,
That road
That the
improvement?
the road
Capital
Road
planning committee
improvements.
should not include,
I make a motion that the capital planning committee should not, review requests for road improvement in the capital process,
and should not include them on the capital plan.
and should not include them on the capital plan.
I'll second that, but I am concerned about the way the bylaw's written.
I think it's
I'll be
easily
honest
worked
with you.
around.
I'll be honest with you, okay? Saying, no, you don't have to deal with this anymore,
Mm-hmm.
okay? We're not gonna have Ed go to you anymore. What I don't wanna have happen is anybody coming back to us afterward and saying, well, what do you mean you're spending that money and you're not checking with us first?
Well, I can
Because that's
guarantee,
what I've heard in the past.
yeah, I can guarantee you'll hear that again.
But if this
You
is
know,
the way
it
the
either is
direction,
or it is not, and that's why I think the charter, I mean, the bylaw needs to be tightened up.
I just was
okay.
about to say something similar. When that happens, then we should look at a bylaw change.
No, I'd like to look at a bylaw change before that, but of course, it could happen next week too, so that's true. Okay,
The
did we
other,
vote?
Yes. Oh, no, did you,
oh, no, you didn't
No.
vote yet.
you
All
said,
those in favor?
did you second it?
I second it.
Aye.
Aye,
The other
unanimous.
The other thing that I think is happening is that I think the committee is getting overly hung up on what they perceive to be not enough money. And I don't know if they've noticed that every board, every department, every committee would like to have more money. And we're living, like I said earlier, with a finite amount of money. I think in the future, we should not give the capital planning committee a target number. I think we should get out of the habit of putting money into the capital stabilization in the fall, because then it just becomes a fixation for them. I think they'd be better served if they would just go forward and rank the projects. Pretend they have no money, pretend they have unlimited funds, rank them according to the need. We'll give you a number after you do that, and then we'll see what can be funded.
I think that
they-
might make it less complicated.
Yeah,
That might make it less complicated. Then we look at it and see, all right, you have this many projects, this is how they're prioritized. We have this much money, and basically, how far does that money stretch?
because every meeting starts with, well, are we gonna get more money next year? And, how can we do this? We've got, $8 million worth of requests, and we've only got $200,000. It's a complete distraction.
There was a day when we didn't have the 200,000.
I know.
And it wasn't very long ago, so I'm grateful
I
that we at
understand.
least have it.
I am too. I'm glad that we're actually
I
moving forward on
prefer to
some of
look
this
at the
stuff.
glasses half, yes.
Just for clarification, would the money that would be appropriated separately for road repair come out of the capital? What would normally go into the capital
No.
fund, or it's completely separate?
No, we're suggesting that that be a separate vote by
Okay.
town meeting.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
But that's different than the ongoing repair things.
Right,
That would be operating,
right.
okay? Okay. You could bring that back to us at some point, Andy, however that needs to happen,
Okay.
okay?
And then, I don't know if the board, we spent an inordinate amount of time on capital planning committee. And the issues associated with that. With respect to the fire station and avoiding that situation in the future where what we had was two members of an advisory committee blocking a project from going to the voters. I don't know if the board wants to talk about a bylaw amendment that would prevent that from happening, or if you want to see how things play out as we go forward.
I think that bylaw needs to be reviewed, and I would support amending that on town meeting floor, or fighting for an amendment to that on town meeting floor. So if you could, I would ask that if Mr. McNabb's in agreement, that we direct you to work with our attorney on wording that to try to meet what we think is the intent, or was the intent, because I don't think the town meeting, when they passed that bylaw, intended that
An advisory committee to the Board of
an advisory
Selectmen.
committee could prevent something from coming to town meeting. Whether that was intentional or not, and I'm not suggesting that they intentionally did that, for anybody that might be misinterpreting me, okay? I don't think that was intentionally done, that somebody said, oh, well, we're gonna prevent this from going to town meeting. But it was the result, okay? It was the result of the discussion, and I'm disappointed in that result. So I'd just like to clean that up a little bit and bring it before town meeting and let the town decide what their intention truly is. Okay? So, Mr. McNabb, do you have any objection to that?
I have no objections.
Okay.
I wholeheartedly agree.
That is the intent of writing laws. You assume that, you know what, you're going to try it out and see if it fits, and if it doesn't, you're going to amend it a little bit to make it work the way that you want to, so. Okay, 3.3, update and discussion of lease of the Heart Free Library.
We talked about this a couple of months ago, and I had put together a draft request for proposals to, or had updated the request for proposals that we had issued a year or so ago, looking for someone to lease the Hart Library. When we talked about it back in October, the board asked me to reach out to the Town Properties Committee and get their input and comment on the draft RFP. I went through Karen Chapman, who is a member and sort of liaison for the Town Properties Committee. She was unable to get the committee to meet, and so therefore we don't have any comments either from the committee as a whole or from any of the committee members individually. So having received no comments, I wanted to bring it back to the board for your consideration on how you'd like to move ahead with it. When we talked before, we talked about, well, if we can't find somebody to lease the building, we should try to get authorization to sell the building. And that there are a number of issues that complicate selling the property. The small size of the lot, the limited parking, there's only a couple of parking spaces there. And so it does make it difficult to sell the property out from under town authorization or town control. But we can, I can move forward either in any way the board wants to move.
Well, I've been thinking about this. And I know that that they've been floating around, or I've heard, oh yeah, well, they looked at the building and it would cost $1 million to bring it up to code. When was that done? Who looked at it? And what was used to determine the $1 million estimate? And do we need a new estimate?
Well, it was done by somebody who, a year or two ago, was potentially interested in leasing the building from the town.
For a specific purpose?
Yes, they had a specific use in mind. And they looked at it, they didn't bring in tradespeople to give estimates on what the heating would cost and what the electrical would cost. They took a walk around the entire building, and it was a sort of back of the envelope, this is $1 million project. When, they looked at the windows, they looked at the condition of the plaster ceilings and walls. They looked at cursory look at the heating plant and at the age of the building, and therefore the age of the systems like the electrical and the plumbing.
But they didn't actually do any inspections.
They didn't do inspections, and they didn't have people come in and actually quote the project, quote the elements of the project. It is, and there have been a number of people who've looked at it, including our facilities coordinator, Mark, and I'll agree it's a substantial undertaking. And the extent of some of the renovations depend on the use.
Exactly.
You would need an elevator for certain uses, but not for others, for instance. And that's generally $50,000 to $100,000 by itself, not including any of the other stuff. It's hard. It's a building that has a lot of sentimental value to the town, and is a nice looking building, and would be nice if it would be great if we had a use for it.
Well, let's say that we wondered what the rehabilitation cost would be to make that into office space. How would we go about finding out what it would take to do that?
Well, it would be imprecise because, it would be partially imprecise, I guess, because you don't know the exact use and the exact nature of how a tenant would fit it out.
All right, well, let's say that it was for municipal use. You'd need an elevator.
We'd need an elevator. We'd need to address any lead and asbestos issues that are in the building. And that would apply to anybody. Mm-hmm. Also applying to anybody really would be complete rehab of the systems in the building, electrical, plumbing, heating. There's no air conditioning.
Rehab or inspection, and then discuss what needed to be rehabbed. We're assuming that everything needs to be gutted. I'm not convinced of that, that's all. How do you convince me?
Well, we would have to have somebody, look at that. And make a determination of the soundness of the electrical system, the heating system, the plumbing system.
That cost us anything?
Yes. yeah, I would, I would say you'd have to bring somebody in, you'd have to pay people to do those kinds of analysis, evaluations.
Our building inspector could tell us what would need to come up to code, right?
Correct.
And then you would need a wiring inspector, a plumbing inspector for the others.
Or contractor, right.
Can we get an estimate on how much it would be to do those estimates?
Sure.
I don't know, never say never. You know?
I do love that building.
Well, I do too, and I'm just thinking that if we have firmer numbers, it may be worth some investment in order to be able to lease out space at some point.
All right.
Okay.
We ready for the work session?
At this point, Andy, if you could come back with answers to those questions, then we could maybe talk prior. I mean, we don't have to decide now on the annual town meeting
Right.
part of that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Where are we at?
I think we're done, except for the back of the page.
Okay. Board of Selectmen updates and reports. Building committee's coming along. We had a meeting with the MSBA, like a pre-board meeting, I guess is the best way to describe it, last week. It went very well. We have a number, what was the number, 89?
89,048,
Yeah, close enough.
something like that.
89.0 million. And that last night officially became our budgeted amount, so we've reduced the budget from what we had, which was 89.5. I think our reimbursement rate on the whole project, and that 89 includes the feasibility study. And it includes, when I say reimbursement, it includes the reimbursement for the feasibility study as well. Okay, so, but that was running around 40 million, I think. It's about, yeah.
In that ballpark, yeah.
So, we have left to go into the MSBA's board meeting the end of the month, where we're hoping we're going to get the full-blown approval to go forward and come to the town in March with for a vote. Hopefully. So, that's the only update I have. Do you have anything?
I do have one thing that I wanted to read on for those folks at home. But I also, Andy, I wanted to ask a quick question for something that wasn't on the agenda. We had that meeting with Comcast, and we're going to find out about from Unitil about the telephone poles. If you could get an update just before I forget. A resident requested an update on that. But
And
go ahead.
that reminds me about the building, the high school building, and its relationship to Comcast, that
TV
meeting.
studio.
Yeah, that needs to happen too.
I can give you an update on the polls if you want.
Why don't we make it as an agenda item for the next time so that it's official,
Okay.
please?
And I also wanted to, with an election coming up, I know that there's been a lot of questions from residents about those positions that are seeking candidates. So I just wanted to read this for the folks at home. Our town election will be held on April 28th, 2014. If you have any questions, you can contact the town clerk's office at 978-597-1704. And the following is a list of positions seeking candidates for the election in April. The Amanda E. Dwight Entertainment Fund Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Assessors, the Board of Health, Cemetery and Parks Commissioners, Library Trustees, North Middlesex Regional School District Committee, 3 at-large positions, Planning Board, 3 open positions, Recreation Commissioner, Town Clerk, Townsend Housing Authority, 2 positions, Trust Fund Commissioner, 2 positions, Trustee of Soldiers Memorial, a veteran, Trustee of Soldiers Memorial, a non-veteran, and Board of Water Commissioners, 2 positions.
Thank you, Mr. McNabb. The other thing I wondered, I know the list is out on the website, but the last time I looked at the website, there wasn't anything about the deadlines. Like, I know nominations are open now, which means if you are interested or know anybody that's interested, they could, what we call pull papers, and basically that's go to the town clerk, write, say that you want to run for a position, and you receive nomination papers. You get approximately 30 or so
36
signatures
I think.
from registered voters in town. You submit those back, and there is a deadline for submitting them back. The time is open now to pull the papers. I
Do
don't
you
know
know the
what
date of the, when it's
See, I
March?
thought
I
they
think
were
it's
going
early
to
March.
post that.
The last time I looked on the website, it wasn't there. I don't recall offhand, and I'm reluctant to guess it.
When the town clerk was here a couple of times ago, I thought she said she was going to post that, the calendar, if you will. But maybe we could just ask, I'll ask her. I'll send her a note.
And if I can say, I highly encourage residents to pull papers. It is great to be able to serve your community in this capacity, and look how much fun Sue and I have.
We do.
We do have fun.
We do.
So it is wonderful. You learn a lot about municipal government, and you learn a lot about your community, and it is a great way to give back to the town of Townsend, which we all dearly love.
And I wish I could remember that quote. I'll bring it with me next time. But basically, I used to say to my children, if you're not willing to do something about it, don't complain. Okay, so
You want
that's
this
not
list?
as nice as.
Okay. Whenever when the meeting's over. All right, we're ready.
Okay, town administrator updates and reports. You got a whole bunch of stuff you're writing down, and I hope that's not all for us now.
Oh, no, I'm just taking notes on what you, I read every word you say, so I can keep it.
Cherish it.
Not much for updates. One of the things that came up last night was the date of the special town meetings for the schools. We had talked about a March 18th, which is a Tuesday, having them all the same time, but the committee is looking at different alternatives to that, so.
And you were going to be checking with the other towns.
Yeah, and so, and the superintendent checked with some other communities, regional districts, to see how they did multi-district or multi-community districts. And so, that'll be getting fleshed out in the next week, right?
Next week, yeah.
They want that by next
Yeah.
week, so stay tuned for that, for the
Excellent.
town meeting date.
We're
looking
actually
at-
thinking of possibly on a Saturday and staggering all 3 towns throughout the Saturday. You know, have one in, earlier in the morning, one mid, and one in the
Well,
afternoon.
Saturday would make it easier for more people to be there, and so that it can truly get properly debated and properly discussed.
Yeah,
at
it
the
would
town
seem to
meeting.
work. It would seem to work well.
Yeah,
so.
I mean,
We're making sure there's no conflicts with other things that are going on, that, might get in the way. So we'll have something by next week, though.
Okay.
okay. the taxes.
Oh, yeah. You had asked Sue for a little info on how taxes are calculated and why rates are going up, and why the tax bills seem to be going up in, maybe more so in Massachusetts than in other states, but it's pretty much the same. The property tax pretty much operates the same way in every state. You've got two elements that create your tax bill. You've got the value of the property, the assessed value of the property, and you've got the tax rate, the rate per $1,000 of valuation. What people know over the last 5 or 6 years is that their values have been dropping because of the recession. Property values have taken a big drop. People know that just by, even if they're not really paying attention to their property tax bills, they're reading in the media that sales are down, prices are down, and then they look and they get their tax bill, and the tax bill went up, and they look at the rate and they say, "You're whacking me on the rate went up even though the value went down." The rate and the value are generally inversely related, so in recessionary periods when the value is dropping, the rate goes up because we still collect the same amount of property tax, plus 2.5%, the amount that we're allowed to grow every year. As we get out of this recession, rates will stabilize and then drop as your values go up, but your overall tax bill is not necessarily going to drop. It's going to hold generally steady or fluctuate depending on how your property compares to the market. So if you have a small ranch without a garage on a small lot, your value is it may not appreciate as much as a 2,400 square foot colonial with a 2-car garage and a pool on 5 acres. So not everybody's property appreciates or depreciates at the same rate. You can get some that go up while others go down, and also the effect of commercial property values. We don't have a lot of commercial property in town, about 8% of our total. But if commercial values drop because of market conditions, the difference is made up on the residential side. If commercial properties appreciate because of market conditions or because they're at full occupancy, then the percentage of the total will drop on the residential side.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, because I've been asked, and I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yeah.
I understand the valuation. The rate, really what's happening is this is how much money the town needs and has said they need to operate for the year.
Yep.
So here's the bill. That bill needs to be divided up amongst everyone. That is really what sets the rate when you look at the evaluation.
Right.
Okay? If there are a number of homes from one year to the next that go into foreclosure, the bank should still be paying taxes on those, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So we're not losing revenue for those homes.
Correct.
However, the value of those homes is going way down.
Right. If you have a vacant property, if you have a building that's been vacated by the owners for whatever reason, foreclosure being a common and obvious one, the value of that property is going to drop.
But the reality is, there's X number of dollars that are needed for the town, just based on our town meetings and what we appropriate for our town meetings. And that's divided amongst us based on the value of our homes.
Right.
And that sets the rate.
Yeah. And just as I had the assessors get me a comparison of the last 5 years of the value of the average assessed value in town. The average assessment in 2010, fiscal year 2010, was a little over $246,000. The average now is a little over $212,000. So it's dropped almost $34,000 in that 5-year period. We're not sure yet if it has hit the bottom. We're at the low so far. This year didn't drop quite as much as the prior year. So we may be in the trough and ready to move back up. It may drop some more. It may just.
But it doesn't really matter, because if the evaluation goes up and you still need X number of dollars, you're still going to set the rate based on how much money the town agreed is our budget.
Yeah. So the rate goes up.
Exactly.
Even though the values go down.
That's right. And something else that affects the property value are things like repossessions. Okay, so if there is a repossessed house in your neighborhood, it's going to bring down the values for everyone around it. It's just, it
Right.
hurts
But
the
not necessarily
average.
your
Hurts the average.
bill.
Right, but not necessarily your bill, because that rate is based on how much money the town needs to raise.
And operate.
In effect, our rate is set when town meeting adopts the budget in May.
Right.
We don't actually set the rate until November or December, but in effect, it's set when the budget is adopted.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful. We've been getting a lot of calls, which, we tend to get. This is the time of year when the actual tax bills go out. So the first 2 quarters are estimated bills, and then in January, the 2 actual bills go out. So it's often at variance from the preliminary bills.
Yeah, I think people realize that when there's a really big project, that's going to affect their tax rate, but they're not thinking about the small increase each year.
Right.
Everything goes up, and, we try to keep the budget down, and we keep it to 2.5. So it's just paying for that 2.5, really.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I think that's all I have.
Okay. Colin?
I make a motion to sign the payroll and bills payable warrants out of session.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion to adjourn at 8:52.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, folks.
Thank you. Good night.